Hello, thank you for joining today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Colossians. Today we are on chapter 3 and we're going to be looking at verse 20. As always, we want to get the literary context that's around here. So go ahead back to verse 18 and read through chapter 4, verse 1 to get that full literary context around what Paul's saying here so we understand the points. Today we're looking at verse 20. It says this. Children, be obedient to your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing to the Lord. So as we look at this, we recognize that we move into the second relationship in the Christian household. The first relationship is a husband and wife. Now we move into the second relationship, which is the child-parent relationship. And as we look at the child-parent relationship, today we look at the child side of this relationship. In this relationship, we're told that the child is to be obedient to their parents. So obedient is really an important word there. It's different than the word submit, which is what the wife was told. In the word submit, there is still freedom for the wife to use her own free will, her own wisdom, to do what she feels is right in following her husband. She can understand if her husband's telling her the wrong thing, or if her husband's being abusive, or if the husband's not being godly. She can make a decision based on that and not necessarily have to follow that, because that's how submission works with that Greek word behind here. But the Greek word behind this word obedience is very different. There is no free will. There is no using your own wisdom. There is no disobedience allowed. It is this idea that you are the child. You must obey your parents. And it follows very much in the concept of the Ten Commandments. I think it's the fifth commandment where we're told that children should obey their parents. And this is Paul following that same line. But it's not just a Jewish concept of child-parent, but in fact, in almost all ancient cultures, the child was told to obey the parent. In all the rules that we see for households in the ancient world, we see that same concept, that same wording in terms of in the Greek especially. So this is not something different per se, but it is somewhat different. Because recognize what's going on here. Paul is writing this to the church at Colossae. So as he writes this to the church of Colossae, he specifically addresses children. In other words, the expectation is that children can be a part of the church and should be a part of the church. So there's a very different view of children here. They are expected to obey, but they're looked upon as individuals. They're looked upon as people. They're looked upon as people who are expected to have an impact in the church community and be part of the church community, which is very different than most of the other cultures during that time, where a child was expected to act and be like a possession, almost like a slave, very much like a slave, actually. And so as we recognize that, children are to obey, but not that their value is lower, not that they're possessions, but because this is what's needed to create a Christian environment, a Christian family, a Christian worldview, has the child obeying the parent. Now, what is a child? It says children obey. What is a child? Well, in theory, a child, using this Greek word behind this word, English word child, a child could be anybody up to the age of 30, 40 years old. And so is that what Paul's talking about here? And what we recognize is that in another area in the New Testament where Paul also writes about these roles, he clarifies a little bit more that children are those who are still being taught by their parents. So in other words, it's children who are living with their parents who are still being taught by their parents. Now, understand that today there are many 20 and 30-year-olds that are still being taught by their parents and still living under their parents' rules and house. So that in that case, they would also be under this command to obey their parents. But if you are a person who you have a parent, you are a child, but you have your own children, you have your own wife, you have your own house, you have your own career, then this wouldn't so much pertain to you any longer, because you would not be looked at as a child in this familiar relationship anymore. But if you are somebody who's still living with your parents, then and you're under their household and they're still teaching you because you don't have a job or what have you, then obedience is still expected. The last thing we see here is that it's pleasing to the Lord. So recognize that as children are obeying their parents, they're actually obeying Christ. They're actually obeying the Lord, because that's what's pleasing to the Lord. The Lord has commanded for children to obey their parents. And so when children do that, it is pleasing to the Lord. So by obeying, you're actually glorifying God. You're actually building up the family. You're actually building up the church. And these are all very important things in as far as what the family's job is in terms of glorifying God. And so that takes care of verse 20, the role of a child in a Christian household. Come back again tomorrow as we go into what the parent's role is. Until then, if you have any questions, thoughts, or comments, put them in the comment section below. And thank you so much for joining with me today. I really appreciate you guys. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.